It's the top of the hour and time for your breaking news report. The NATO summit has officially concluded with the departure of all visiting heads of state from Ankara. But before making a swift exit, President Donald Trump confirmed during bilateral talks with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky that the United States is considering providing Kyiv with a license to self-produce the Patriot anti-missile defense system. The US leader called the decision an escalation of the Russia-Ukraine war, but one that will hopefully lead to an end in the conflict.
But one of the things I think we're going to be talking about today, a little birdie told me this, about the fact that we'll give them the right to make Patriots. We'll show them how to do it. It's very complex, actually, but you'll figure out the complexity quickly. And we're talking about that, and the company that makes them, which is building now 4 plants, all of our companies will be able to do this in 2 to 3 months. If you order a Patriot, now you have to wait a long time for them. Same thing with Tomahawks. We have a lot of certain equipment, but they call it the elite equipment, and you don't need elite equipment necessarily for a war. But so one of the things we're going to be talking about is we're going to give a license to you to make Patriots. That's pretty cool, right? This way you can't complain that we're not giving them enough. I say, make them yourself. We haven't informed the company of that yet, but that'll work out all right. I'm sure they'll be thrilled.
NATO member states, particularly European allies and Canada, issued the Ankara Summit Declaration yesterday, pledging 70 billion euros in military equipment, assistance and training for Ukraine this year alone. However, the announcement comes as NATO members admit they are unable to sustain their exorbitant military spending on the Ukraine conflict. Dutch Defense Minister Dylan Jesselgus-Zegerius reportedly told Bloomberg on Monday that the Netherlands are at their limit and can no longer provide direct military support to Ukraine. Similarly, Bulgarian Prime Minister Rumen Radev noted during the summit that Bulgaria has exhausted its capabilities to provide Kyiv with military support.
Russia and Vladimir Putin. Russia is shooting ballistic missiles on Kyiv every week, every night. What is your message to the Kremlin?
My message is clear. We, the collective West, have been trying to achieve a conventional victory over the biggest nuclear power without having enough capabilities to counter their hypersonic missiles. And this is increasing dramatically the risk of escalation. This is increasing dramatically the risk of involving nuclear answer, and this is very, very dangerous. That's why we need to develop conditions as soon as possible for diplomacy and peace and not to escalate.
Russia is a long-term security threat to the alliance.
This is the statement from the summit from 2022. But again, we need to find all the conditions that lead to peace, sustainable and just peace. Thank you.
How can you describe currently the Bulgarian-Ukrainian military cooperation? Because Bulgaria stopped its military aid, it declared it.
Yes, I have just said that we have exhausted our capabilities to provide military support. I mean weapons and munitions from the warehouses of the Bulgarian armed forces. We have provided 13 packages. We don't have anything less to supply to Ukraine. What we can do, this is technical military assistance. What does it mean? We can guarantee that we can accept military equipment to be repaired in Bulgaria. This is our support.
Over in Russia, Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak announced in a government meeting on Wednesday the implementation of a diesel fuel export ban, effective immediately until July 31st. The decision comes amid targeted Ukrainian drone strikes on Russian energy infrastructure, threatening domestic fuel markets. Just this morning, Kremlin officials reported Ukrainian attacks on oil depots in Tver and the Stavropol Krai region. Russian citizens report fuel shortages and price spikes, with drivers in many regions waiting in line for hours to refuel. President Putin noted that the strikes on Russian oil refineries seek to create anxiety within Russian society, but called this an unattainable goal, stating that Moscow's power system is very resilient.
Marco, why don't you answer that? Because you're right in the middle of it.
Yeah, no, I think what you're discussing is the ability of Ukraine to reach deep inside of Russia and conduct strikes. I think that's one of the dynamics that's changed in this war over the last few months, and that is that the Russians are finding it more difficult to defend their own airspace. And what we hope that means is it's going to create the space now to negotiate the end of this war.
It's an escalation, but it's also an escalation that can help lead to an end. And
in a step toward normalizing relations with Russia amid ongoing peace efforts between Moscow and Kiev, the International Olympic Committee Executive Board has provisionally lifted the suspension of the Russian Olympic Committee, allowing Russian athletes to return to the international arena. Following a detailed review, the IOC decided to lift the ban, which has been in place since October 12, 2023, after the Russian Olympic Committee confirmed it no longer includes members from regional sports organizations in territories under the jurisdiction of Ukraine's National Olympic Committee. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov called the decision an important step toward restoring the lawful rights of Russian athletes to participate in international competitions.
Our session last week, and you saw us strengthening our position on neutrality, and that then obviously makes very clear sense since we've got this new strategic direction on where to go. We made it clear that we wanted to ensure all athletes have the possibility to compete at the Olympic Games and not be held responsible for their government's actions. And I believe that this is what this decision speaks to. It allows for Russian athletes to take part in sport competitions, but we've also been very clear that we do not condone any violence and war around the world, and we will continue with that stance. We also made it very clear that we would not be changing any of the recommendations when it pertains to state officials of Russia, and we would not be taking the decision at this point to look at any potential events in Russia. So none of that has changed. That will all still stay in place, and we will review the protocols around the anthem and flag in the future. But for now, we felt that it was really important for athletes to have the possibility of returning back to competition.
We now shift our focus to the US-Iran conflict, where President Trump noted yesterday that he's no longer convinced that he wants to make a deal with Iran. The US leader seemed content to instead, and I quote, finish the job, warning Iran of further retaliatory strikes planned for last night in response to recent Iranian attacks on shipping vessels in the Strait of Hormuz. The president went even further to say that the United States might just denuclearize Iran without a deal.
They want to make a deal, but they don't know how to make a deal, and then they go around shooting ships at night. I don't like that. You know, they're dealing with very fine people. They're dealing with Steve Witkoff. They're dealing with Jared Kushner and J.D. Vance, and they're dealing with Marco and Scott. They're dealing with great people, but I don't know. I think they're a little loco. They're a little crazy. But they told us they'd like to go to the funeral of a person who was killed a lot of people. Khomeini killed a lot of people over the years, and there for a long time. Don't forget, what we did should have been done 47 years ago. It could have been done any time within 40. This has gone on for, they were the bully of the Middle East. So they're a much different country. Now, in one day, all of their anti-aircraft things are gone. That doesn't mean they're not going to get a plane at some point, but all of it's gone. Everything's gone. Their leaders are gone. They had leaders, they're gone, and they had another set of leaders, they're gone. Now they have another set of leaders, they may be gone. Who knows? And you know what? I may be gone too, because I'm their number one target. It's out all over the place. I'm their number one because they're scum. That's the way they act, and that's the way they've done it for 47 years. But I'm doing what's right for the country. I'm doing really what's right for the world. They have to be stopped. And they've killed thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. They killed 52,000 protesters over the last 3 months. So when you say we're not doing well, I think we're doing phenomenally well. Our military has been incredible. Plus, we had a blockade. Did we have a blockade? Did you ever see a blockade work that way? You know, for you that said we're not doing well there, we did great.
And early this morning, US Central Command confirmed that in line with President Trump's directive, its forces completed an additional round of strikes against Iran last night. The US struck approximately 90 military targets along Iran's coastline to further degrade their ability to threaten freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz. In retaliation, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps claimed responsibility for missile and drone strikes targeting US military installations in Bahrain, Kuwait, and Qatar earlier today. The escalating US-Iran tensions saw US Secretary of War Pete Hegseth cancel his scheduled trip to Israel this week, where the secretary planned to meet with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and defense officials. The visit was also expected to address Israel's security concerns regarding potential F-35 fighter jet sales to Turkey, following President Trump's growing support towards Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan.
Meeting today settled a lot of things. It was a very, very good meeting. And people understand that the United States we've been treated very unfairly. And then on top of that, they weren't there for a really de-nuking, because it's really not a war so much, it's a de-nuking of Iran, de-nuclearization of Iran. So this is all about taking nuclear weapons, not allowing Iran to have nuclear weapons, and everybody should like that, even you.
Onto the matter of Syria, President Trump sat down with former Al-Qaeda leader turned Syrian President Ahmed al-Sharaa on the sidelines of the NATO summit on Wednesday, where he confirmed to reporters that the US will remove Damascus from the state sponsor of terrorism list. The US Secretary of State Marco Rubio confirmed yesterday that President Trump has informed Congress of his administration's intent to rescind Syria's designation as a state sponsor of terrorism, following a 45-day pre-notification period.
I'm with the highly respected president of Syria, and we are working together. We were, right from the beginning, we were responsible, along with, actually, President Erdogan also felt very strongly. And he's done a really fantastic job as president. He's unified the country in a very short period of time. I'd say like a year and a half, about a year and a half. And right from the beginning, it was a real mess. It was a very disjointed place, and he's brought it together. He's a strong person. He's a great leader. He's respected by everybody, including me. And we're proud to have him together. We're just here to talk a little bit. We released sanctions from the country, which really, I think, was a big boost. Sanctions was a very important thing. And we're proud of the job he's doing. Syria's become a very stable, I mean, it's amazing. In a short period of time, it's really been stabilized. And we're proud of that. And to be part of the Middle East. Syria had one of the great cultures, the professors and lawyers and doctors. It had one of the great cultures of any country, not just Middle East. And then it went through this terrible period of time. But it's a country that a lot of people are very proud of, and they're proud of the job he's done. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Stay connected to our Love World Network channels for the latest updates. And now, moving on to more international developments. In Venezuela, the death toll following 2 major earthquakes last month has risen to 3,811. National Assembly President Jorge Rodriguez reported on Wednesday that 16,740 people were injured in the quakes, while 17,907 have been left homeless. Rescue efforts continue, with Israel's foreign ministry confirming yesterday that it will extend the deployment of its humanitarian aid delegation in Venezuela for another 2 weeks at the request of Venezuelan interim President Delcy Rodriguez. In an effort to further fund earthquake relief and reconstruction efforts, Rodriguez announced on Wednesday that Venezuela has formally requested the release of its gold reserves held at the Bank of England.
I have decided to send a letter, among others, to the King of England, asking for the gold being held at the Bank of England to be released. That gold belongs to our people, and it must be used to address the terrible, tragic consequences of this double earthquake. Venezuela has the resources to recover and to get back on its feet. From here, I want to repeat a call we have never stopped making. End the sanctions and the blockade against Venezuela. Venezuela has resources blocked around the world that could be used for this reconstruction and recovery process. But most importantly, this must be a full human recovery in employment, in work, in quality education for our boys, our girls, and our young people. We have the resources.
We'll be back shortly after the break. Stay tuned for more international headlines.
Feasting on messages from the Pastor Chris Digital Library just got more exciting. Experience the transformative power of God's Word like never before with life-changing teachings by the man of God, Pastor Chris, on the Pastor Chris Digital Library, now available in all of the most widely spoken languages of the world. Dutch.
Christus in jou, de hoop van glorie. Vanaf dat moment, wanneer Christus zijn intrek neemt in de kamers van jouw hart.
Spanish.
Vamos a usar el nombre de Jesús. Expulsar demonios.
French.
Je pourrais vous montrer plusieurs autres domaines importants dans la Bible.
Arabic.
لا يمكنك تمجيد الله بجسد مريض.
Mandarin.
白衣的人站在他们旁边。当耶稣升天，两个天使出现在门徒注视耶稣的升天。
Russian.
Вот почему вокруг так много убийств. В мире так много насилия в мире.
German.
Tat es in Christus. Das habe ich gerade gelesen.
In Christus Jesus.
Tat es in Christus.
You can now access these powerful teachings culled from the Healing Stream's live healing services with Pastor Chris, with titles such as Who is in Your House? Where is Jesus? What is the Purpose of Healing? Knowing God's Plan for You, Part 1 and 2. Why did Jesus come? Using the name of Jesus. He has given us His glory, the benediction, and others in your preferred language, making it easier to understand, receive, and walk in the light of the Word. Don't miss out on this incredible opportunity. Subscribe to access these messages in your preferred language and experience the miraculous. Download the Pastor Chris Digital Library app today from the Love World App Store at www.loveworldappstore.com. Pastor Chris Digital Library, a place of solutions.
The European Union is currently engaged in a fight for its freedom, with the European Parliament scheduled to vote today on the controversial chat control legislation, which allows big tech companies to scan private messages, emails, and shared files and photos, allegedly to combat the spread of child abuse materials. While the initial temporary legislation, Chat Control 1.0, expired in April after previous rejections by the Parliament, MEPs narrowly voted on Tuesday to approve an urgent procedure to revive the rules. Today's vote could reinstate the scanning permission for platforms until April 2028. One privacy advocate noted on X that it's a dark day for privacy and democracy because only an absolute majority of 361 votes can now stop the law.
In diesem Hohen Haus der Demokratie wird offenbar so lange abgestimmt, bis das Ergebnis passt. Sommer, Sonne, Massenüberwachung. Und so stellen sich einige EU-Eliten den Start in die Sommerferien vor. Kurz vor der Pause soll noch schnell eine Überwachungsstruktur beschlossen werden. Und das, obwohl das Parlament bereits die Chatkontrolle abgelehnt hat. Jetzt wird derselbe Vorschlag einfach wieder aufgewärmt. Und Sie alle wissen genau, dass es für die dauerhafte Chatkontrolle keine Mehrheit gibt. Deshalb versucht man nun gemeinsam mit dem Rat, das Ganze durch die Hintertür wiederzubeleben. Deshalb wählt man wie so oft immer wieder die Salamitaktik. Und übersetzt heißt das, private Nachrichten sollen technisch durchsuchbar gemacht werden, Bilder, Videos und sogar Texte automatisch geprüft werden. Und dass man heute versucht, das Ganze durch einen Dringlichkeitsantrag durchzubringen, zeigt doch den Geist dieses Vorhabens. Seit 2021 versucht Ursula von der Leyen schon Zugang zu unseren privaten Nachrichten zu bekommen. Sie selbst kann ihre SMS nicht offenlegen. Und jeder weiß, was 2021 auf unserem Kontinent los war während der Corona-Maßnahmenzeit. Und natürlich, dieses Argument zieht nicht, ich bin selbst Mutter, natürlich wollen wir alle Kinder schützen. Aber echter Kinderschutz beginnt nicht damit, jeden Bürger unter Generalverdacht zu stellen. Echter Kinderschutz beginnt dort, wo wirklich Täter gefährlich werden, bei harten Strafen statt Bewährung. Es müssen offene Täterregister her, bei besserer Strafverfolgung und die Zerschlagung von Grooming-Gangs. Wer Kinderschänder mit Samthandschuhen anfasst, aber Millionen unter Generalverdacht stellen möchte, setzt bewusst die Prioritäten falsch.
Meta is in trouble yet again after it became public knowledge that its new AI image generator Muse will allow users to create hyper-realistic images using photos from public Instagram accounts without direct consent. Muse Image launched on Tuesday, and every public account is automatically opted into this new feature, making their profiles fair game and creating a very real privacy concern. To opt out of the feature, users on Instagram must go to their menu and disable the setting under the Sharing and Reuse tab. Meta has received strong backlash since the launch, with one online commentator warning that pulling real users into generated photos without explicit consent is a privacy landmine waiting to detonate. And now let's take a recap of today's headlines. President Trump announces he is considering giving Ukraine production rights for the Patriot defense system.
But one of the things I think we're going to be talking about today, a little birdie told me this, about the fact that we'll give them the right to make patriots. We'll show them how to do it. It's very complex, actually.
Russia bans diesel exports until month end to secure domestic fuel markets amid intensified Ukrainian attacks on Russian energy infrastructure.
Marco, why don't you answer that? Because you're right in the middle of it.
Yeah, no, I think what you're discussing is the ability of Ukraine to reach deep inside of Russia and conduct strikes.
IRGC responds to new round of US strikes on Iranian military targets, with attacks on US bases in Bahrain, Kuwait, and Qatar. Backlash grows over Meta's Muse AI, using public Instagram photos to generate images without explicit consent. And with that, we conclude the midday edition of the news for today. I'm Marika Schroeder, and until next time, goodbye.